Thank you all for coming this afternoon. My name is Johnson. I'm a developer at the University of Iowa. I've been working with Drupal for about 5 years, and for the first 4 years, I pretty much worked on projects alone. I didn't have a project manager available at all. And now for about the past year, I've worked a little bit with a couple of project managers, but our project management team isn't quite large enough to work on all of our web development projects. So for the most part, I've still been leading some projects by myself with a couple smaller teams of developers, more as a technical lead. So in this session, I'm hoping to share with you some of the things that I've learned about how to manage these projects without having any formal project management experience. How as a developer can you step up and fill that role for your team? So one of the first things I've learned is the importance of getting to know 3 groups or entities on your project. The first one would be the stakeholders or the client. At least in my case, usually they all come in groups, and you have to figure out who are the power players in these meetings. Who do you need to, get on your side and be able to, really convince that maybe something isn't a good idea. So knowing, who those key players are is really important. And also really understanding their project. What are your client's goals? If a client, not only if they come to you and say, hey, our goal with the project is to increase interaction on our website, but how are they going to measure that goal? Do they just want to have people reading more articles on the site, or are they looking to increase comments that are left on the articles? Because those are 2 very different metrics which could have really different development pieces that the client needs. So then the third important part is knowing your development team. So if you work by yourself, that's awesome. You know your team, you know what you like to do, what you don't like to do. But if you are working with others, it's really important to know what motivates them to work and which parts of the project that they find interesting, because those are going to be the parts that they really want to work on. And also you can maybe try to align some of the tasks to their interests. So we all know that no matter how small your project is, usually those requirements change from day one. So how do you keep track of what your client tells you on day one to what you end up having to deliver at the end? So there are a lot of task tracking software solutions out there. I've used a few. I don't really think any one is perfect for everybody. Use what you want. But there are some concepts that I found that are similar between all of these tools that can really help. So the first that I found really helpful is having an overview of every feature, each chunk of functionality that the client wants, and having it maintained in a way that you can come back, you can update it easily, and not just update what changed, but why it changed, what was the motivation. So that a few weeks later, when the client comes back and says, oh no, wait, we changed our mind back, you can say, oh, but hey, this was your motivation the first time around, so what's motivating you now? And maybe they end up needing to keep what they had said. Making sure that you're writing good tasks, that they're actionable, that everyone knows what needs to be done for the task to be considered complete. So here's an example of an actual task on one of my projects. It just said mockups was their title, no description. So after a while, I went and talked to the guy the task was assigned to, and I was like, hey, what's up with this? Like, do you know what's going on? Because I sure don't know what is supposed to be done with this. And he said, I have no idea. So we just closed the task. So all of our clients, they have certain constraints, whether it be time or budget. And we all know that everybody wants more out of their initial site than they're probably ever going to fit within those constraints. So trying to keep an organized list of what are their true go-live requirements, which that they absolutely have to go live, versus the things that would be really nice to have. Or maybe things that they know they're going to come back around for a second round of development on their project. So keeping those organized. So I found it really helpful to have like a 1.0 release bucket for tasks, along with a wish list for the 1.0 release, along with just future iterations for that, the next round or 2. Then being able to view your task by that feature or that chunk of functionality, so that when I'm saying, well, hey, the client said that they wanted, an area on the site that just, showed all these news items. Well, you're probably going to need a content type. You're probably going to need a view, maybe a role to restrict who can create those news items. So those are different tasks all related to that one feature, and being able to see those in one place to kind of see what's left or what's done is really helpful. Also, this idea of a status. Is your task blocked, maybe by a question that you have out to the client, or is there another task that needs to be completed before you can get to it? In this case, our purple tags, these are postponed tasks. So these are things that we'll be doing in another round of development we wanted to keep track of now, and it relates to this feature. So Palantir put together this build spec that I heard about a year ago, and it's been super helpful. It really helps making sure that you're asking the right questions, and that everything is planned before you start building. So what this looks like, this build spec, it's a spreadsheet, lots of tabs in Google Docs. This is available on the previous slide. But where I find this useful is taking those tasks and digging into that next technical level. And I found that if there are blanks on the spreadsheet, then there are probably questions that I need to be going back to my clients about before we start getting too far into development, or maybe even before we start at all. So it's just that one last step, that last check that you have everything accounted for. This is also really helpful for putting together estimates of how long something is going to take to build out, because you can kind of see at a quick glance, how much goes into this one content type or this one view. So then, especially when you're working with a group, even if it's a small group, there are certain procedures or certain expectations that you're all going to have to follow. And for, you would think sometimes that people just know there are these general things to do, but I found that especially bringing someone new onto the team, that what I think is just commonplace and everyone's going to know what to do and what's expected, that's not true at all. So being very explicit and having some documentation written is excellent. Storing that documentation in an accessible location that everyone can access whenever they want to remind themselves of what needs to be done. And then throughout the course of your project, what those expectations are, or those procedures are likely to change. So just going back and updating that as often as you need to. So meetings, they can be a huge drain of time for your budget on for a project if they're not well planned or if you don't have the right people there. So sending an agenda in advance, making sure that people know what you're going to talk about at the meeting. This is going to help people kind of focus before they come on what they can expect. If they need to bring anything, if there are any deliverables, questions that they need answers to before they come, having those in there so that everybody can be prepared. And it's really easy as the project kind of evolves for more and more people to want to come, especially as different groups from the client side maybe get involved in different features you start working on. So being just aware of who's coming to your meetings, and do you really need all of them, or can you pare it down to just those decision makers? So I've usually found that having about 4 people at every meeting is usually about where you want to be. If you start to get more than that, then just being really careful that you have who you need. And to keep the project moving forward, covering what your immediate blockers are. It's really easy to look, 3 months out into that feature that you're really super excited to get to build, but if you're not there yet, it might not even be worth your time to ask your client about it if you're not going to get to it in 3 months. Don't derail your train. And then always make sure to follow up a meeting with some sort of summary and a list of action items and who needs to do those things. I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a meeting with a client and they tell me they want something, and I go, yeah, that's really cool. Okay, I think we're on exactly the same page. We've spent the last half hour talking about this, and we leave. I build this out. I send it to them for review, and all of a sudden the client says, no, wait, that is not at all what I wanted you to do. That wasn't at all what I was expecting. And I'm thinking, were we not just in the same meeting together where you told me that this is what you wanted? So be sure to send that summary so that if something does seem wrong to them, or even to someone else on the team, that they can come back right away before anything really gets done and raise those questions. All right, so I flew through that a little bit quicker than I thought I would. So here's your friendly reminder that there's a sprint on Sunday. I really hope to see you all there. Sprints are a great time. Do you have any questions? No questions? Yes.
So So how did you end up in this role? Like, I mean, because you're obviously you're a developer, and because I find myself, I work on a small team as well, which I think that's how these kind of things happen. But maybe you could kind of explain, like, how did you, like...
How did I get here? Yeah, sure. So the question is, as a developer, how did I get to doing this project management or this, like, technical leading?
Yeah.
So really, when I started doing Drupal at all, it was pretty much just me on every project. I didn't have a choice. That was just the situation I was in. So I just had to kind of pick a few things up. So then when I changed jobs and when I joined the team, you know, it was really new having to like work with other people and kind of negotiate that. But because I had already worked by myself and had to figure out these practices for keeping things on track, then I just kind of already knew how to do it. So I was just kind of naturally put into that role for my group.
And how big is your team about?
So my team, I think we have about 10 full-time developers on the team. But on every project, we probably have maybe 2 to 3, you know, maybe a fourth person floating in and out as we need them. Yes?
So, if you're able to sort of take on all these project management tasks as a developer, is it, do we actually need project managers, or should we just cut the fat and have, like, you know, get the middleman out, all developers, we are?
Sure. Okay, so the question is, you know, if a developer can do these project management roles and responsibilities, should we just cut them out altogether? And I've been really giving that question a lot of thought lately. And the more I think about it, I feel like at some level a project manager is needed. Now, what exactly that means when you say project manager is kind of in question. What I expect a project manager to do is not at all what the project managers that I work with think their job is. So there's a huge disconnect there. And, you know, so I think having someone that maybe if you're working on multiple projects, especially because like with my team, each of us is maybe on 2 or 3 projects at a time. So having someone that's up at a high enough level to kind of know how much time everyone has available to be working on things would be really helpful. And so maybe it's more of you have a technical lead, and the technical lead of every project has to meet, and they kind of, you know, figure that out amongst themselves. But at least at my organization, it's so big, we probably do need that next level, just so that the people that are doing the technical leading or the development work can focus on doing that.
What percentage of your time is spent on being the technical lead and doing project management tasks versus actually programming or doing work?
All right, so what percentage of my time is spent doing project management and what percentage is spent doing development work? That's changed a lot over this last year. So it used to be that I was almost completely doing development work. Now that's a little hard to answer because the projects that I'm on, one of them, my entire role is just management. So at the moment, I'm probably doing almost 90% project management and 10% development, which is a huge shift. It's really hard to adjust to. I think it'd be nice to be a little more in the trenches, doing a little more development, just to kind of not lose that. I feel like it's really nice to go to a meeting with a client and be able to answer some of the technical questions and answer some of the management parts without having to have, you know, 2 or 3 people there to, you know, kind of pass the question along. Yes?
When you were talking about the Palantir build spec, you showed the table of content type and field definitions. Are there also elements for defining needs for views and other elements of the build?
Yeah, so let me go back to that, and I can actually pull that up. So you can get this sheet directly from them in this article. That's really nice. That explains why this is helpful.
Do you have the slides online?
Yes. So I added a link, and I don't know how the caching is on the MidCamp site because it looked like it wasn't showing up to me, but there is a link to my slides that should eventually be showing up, and I'll double check that later tonight. So I don't know if you can see this, but at the bottom they do have different tabs. So usually you start and you come in and you would define what your fields are here. And then once you have your fields defined, you can go back to, you know, your node types, and it will like tell you if your machine name for your field doesn't validate from that list on the other sheet. So you can kind of see where maybe you didn't plan something out. You can, of course, delete any of these tabs that you don't need. Like if you're not using field collections, you can just ignore this and get rid of it. You could add a tab for whatever you want. Do you have a specific question about this?
No, I just wanted to know if there was more to it than what you
Yes,
said.
there is much more to it. You can pretty much plan everything. And I think I had heard a while ago that there's some sort of like wizard thing you can use that will take this and actually like implement it on your site so you don't have to go touch everything once you've filled out your spreadsheet. I don't know how it works.
Yes.
You said there was disagreement between what you think a project manager should do and what the project managers who work with think they should do. And I assume your presentation is how you think it should be. What has your experience been with sort of the other things that creep in that shouldn't be there?
So it's like what I expect a project manager to do versus like kind of what they've been doing.
Yeah.
So I would really hope that a project manager would know from a high level what the priorities are for the project and guide those. So especially watching what are those launch blockers for your project and making sure that you're kind of on track to hit whatever deadline your client might have. But in my experience, it's just kind of the way my team works a little bit more is that the project managers just basically say, okay, here's your project, here's your deadline. You just let me know when things are done. So they don't set the priorities. It comes down to the devs to figure out what those important pieces are. And I think sometimes, especially as a dev, when you see that one piece that's really cool and you want to work on it, you make that one part of the site really neat, you maybe focus too much time on that. And so then at the end, we're scrambling to actually get their, minimum product done on time. Yes?
What's your opinion on waterfall versus more agile approaches?
So you say those words, waterfall and
Agile?
agile. I honestly don't even know what they mean. I can't tell you what my opinion is. I just started reading about formal project management yesterday afternoon. I actually read about a user story versus a use case. So I'm sorry.
Baptism by fire.
Yes.
How do you balance when you're dealing with something and you want to do it just to build up skills in it, but you don't know if you want to use it? So like if you want your team to have skills in a technology they've not used before, but you know it's going to slow down the project, how do you?
So how do you budget in time for exploring new technology that you might want to use, but you're not sure if you're going to end up using it at the end of the project, like once you evaluate it?
Yeah. Or how do you decide when to keep doing it with the skills that your team has versus
So doing it the way you've always done versus just trying something new? I think with my team, we all spend a lot of time just kind of reading about different things, and we can kind of tell. I feel like you can just kind of feel when maybe you're doing something an old way. When you start to see that everyone else is doing it differently, maybe you should reconsider. So that's when we start poking at things more. We don't bill that to the client. That's not our time to them. But we might explore it for a while and spend a few hours on it and see, does this seem like a reasonable approach? If it does, we'll keep going with it. And if it doesn't, then we know rather quickly how to do it the way we've always done it. Any more questions? Okay. So if I can get back to it. Okay, never mind. If you want to leave me feedback, I would really appreciate it. It's on one of my last slides that I don't know how to get back to. There's a link. So thank you all for coming, and I hope to see you at the sprint on Sunday.